Welcome to the world's meeting place. American.
Practically narcotic.
Freedom.
Oh, yes. I like very much.
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
Joining us, thank you for doing so. I'm Jack Blood, your radio gun. You're listening to Deadline Live, AmericanFreedomRadio.com, and all of our great affiliates from coast to coast around the world. Joining us here in the first hour is just one of my favorite guests. About 6 months ago, we just did a fascinating, informative show with him. That is Bruce Gagnon on his film Arsenal of Hypocrisy, which has been out for years and is now available on the web for free. You must see this film. Go back and listen to that interview. Today, unfortunately, we have to talk about something rather ugly. That is peaceful protesters being roughed up and arrested by Obama thugs at the Pentagon. Bruce Gagnon is the founder and coordinator for the spaceforpeace.org and the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. You have to understand how important this issue is. Look up. How would you like a war right above your head? Things falling down on you, people being killed by the millions. I mean, this is very, very dangerous, very expensive, and very provocative. Since its 1992 founding, the Global Network has met each year in order to bring together key activists who are working on or interested in space issues. It was the intention of the founders to create an organization that would serve as a clearinghouse for space issues and act as a spark to ignite education and organizing in order to build an international citizens movement. In 1997, the Cancel Cassini campaign that launched 72 pounds of plutonium into space was featured on the TV program 60 Minutes. This was one of their very visible and successful efforts. Too many successful efforts to mention, but bottom line is, it's still a major problem. This is just a horrible story, and it really shows how there has been no change here. We have another Bush, allegedly, in the White House. He acts exactly the same, no difference. The droning campaign continues. The weaponizing, militarization of space continues. We must do something about it and shed some light on this. Bruce Gagnon joins us again from spaceforpeace.org. Bruce, always great to have you.
Thanks for having me again.
Let's start off here. You had a protest at Vandenberg Air Force Base, I believe, on January 31st. Tell us what the order was, why you were out there, what you were protesting, and then let's talk about what happened to you.
Well, importantly, the Obama administration is continuing the Bush policy of testing missile defense systems. In this case, a $150 million test, firing a missile from Kwajalein Atoll in the Pacific that they labeled a missile from Iran. Now, this is the Pentagon doing this.
That was the Raytheon Boeing test that I heard failed.
It's right. It did fail. But what's really important is they're projecting this false image of Iran, first of all, having a capability that they don't have. Iran cannot launch a missile to the continental United States. So this missile launched from Kwajalein Atoll in the Pacific towards California. They then fired a missile from Vandenberg Air Force Base in Southern California to go up and try to knock it out in deep space. And as you say, it failed. But again, importantly, they're projecting in the minds of the American people that Iran has this capability. Iran is, some people will be so confused they'll even think Iran launched the missile. It's clearly brainwashing on the part of the Obama Pentagon. And so leaders from our organization and from a women's group called Women's International League for Peace and Freedom gathered just 11 activists from the Southern California area to go out there and vigil at the time of this launch. They just wanted to be a witness. We were running an international email campaign informing people about it. And as they gathered, they were approached by the security from the base, and immediately 8 of them were arrested. 3 of them sort of ran off, and 8 of them were arrested. They hadn't done anything wrong. They were standing outside beyond the green line, that separates the base from the highway property. And so they hadn't crossed the line. They hadn't done anything wrong at all, other than stand there and hold signs. One woman, 80 years old, was thrown to the ground by the military police. They stuck their knee in her back and she ended up having to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance because she was in such great pain.
Throwing 80-year-old women to the ground and roughing them up because they're simply redressing their grievances, using their constitutional right for free speech, and protesting something as dangerous as she was.
Exactly. And it's my contention that the base commander would not feel that he has the authority to, on his own, break past practice. For years, for last 30-some years, people have been regularly holding protests and vigils outside of Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, because it's always been a launch base. So people have always gone there to protest against the practice firing of nuclear weapons from that base. And that base commander would not feel the necessity, not feel the inclination to go and have these people arrested for not doing anything at all, unless he was receiving orders from higher up. And the point that really angers me the most is that Obama, remember he went to Prague in the Czech Republic soon after being elected, and he announced that he wanted to get rid of nuclear weapons, and we're going to get rid of nuclear weapons in our lifetime and everything else, and we want to get into serious negotiations with Russia. But if Obama was particularly serious about that position, he wouldn't be having his allies who are out there trying to create the public discussion in favor of getting rid of nuclear weapons. He wouldn't have them treated in such a way. In addition, Obama, in his budget for 2010 and 2011, is continuing the Bush policy of investing in new generations of nuclear weapons technologies, and I think even more importantly, Obama is continuing this policy and even actually escalating the policy of now surrounding Russia and China with so-called missile defense systems.
This is a very dangerous game, isn't it, Bruce? I mean, first let's just talk about the open hypocrisy here, because at Obama's State of the Union, he went off a rather lengthy diatribe on how he was going to eliminate nuclear weapons. He was going to be the anti-nuclear weapon commander-in-chief. And yet, 3 days later, he started, funding the nuclear program even more than George Bush or any of his predecessors. And, of course, the excuse was, well, we just have to dust these things off. They're getting a little dusty, and we have to maintain, our nuclear edge here. There's threats around the world. But as you say, he's saber-rattling in a very dangerous way, threatening superpowers around the world. They don't like it, Bruce.
That's right. Obama has just announced that we've just built new U.S. military bases in Romania and Bulgaria. Now, anybody that remembers the time of the former Soviet Union, those two countries were part of the Warsaw Pact, part of the Soviet sphere of influence, part of their whole coalition. And now the United States is building bases in Romania and Bulgaria. NATO is expanding to surround Russia by moving now into Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, into Georgia, all right on Russia's border. Can you imagine? And in addition to that now, the Pentagon has just announced that they're going to put missile defense systems into Poland, 30 miles from the Russian border.
Yeah.
And also they're going to put them in Romania. Now, these missile defense systems, they have the word defense on there, but actually their military mission is to pick off a retaliatory strike after a U.S. first strike attack. So the United States launches a first strike attack on Russia or China, and then when they try to fire their retaliatory capability in response, that's when the missile defense system comes into play to pick off any remaining retaliatory strikes. And so this is very provocative. Imagine how Russia is feeling as they're seeing this NATO and U.S. military encirclement of their country. Now, the equivalent would be as if Russia or China were setting up bases in Mexico and Canada, putting missile defense systems there, and then putting their ships just off the coast of either shore of the United States. We'd be freaking out, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine that, folks? How would you sit well with the Chinese ICBMs or Chinese nuclear warheads and missiles down in Tijuana or in Mexico or over the border in Canada? I don't think Americans would be too happy about that, let alone the politicians.
Yeah, but unfortunately, American people don't know anything about these developments. At the same time that the U.S. and NATO are surrounding Russia, the United States is also doubling its military presence in the Asian-Pacific region, beginning an encirclement of China. These missile defense systems are now being deployed in Japan, South Korea, in Australia, and they're going to be put into Guam. They're on ships, on Aegis destroyer ships, on board those ships, and they're being ported just off the coast of China. And now, on top of all that, Raytheon has been given the go-ahead by President Obama to sell missile defense systems to Taiwan, the equivalent of China putting missiles into Cuba, if you will.
Sure. Well, we didn't like it when Russia did that to Cuba, and we almost blew up the whole world, Bruce. I mean, is that how close we are? What is the doomsday clock at today with all of this action going on? I'm not a fatalist. I'm not an end-of-the-world guy, Bruce, but this doesn't look good. None of this looks good. As the more I read about the geopolitical structure here, the more on edge I have to be, because these people aren't kidding around right now.
Well, you know, the Pentagon says that under corporate globalization of the world economy, every different country is going to have a different role, a different job. And they say, we're not going to make stuff in America anymore because it's cheaper for the corporations to go overseas, maximize profits internationally, go to China, to India, to Indonesia, etc. They say our job under corporate globalization will be security export. And so it's no coincidence today that the number one industrial export product of America is what?
Weapons.
That's right. And when weapons are your number one industrial export product, what is your global marketing strategy for that product line?
Get people angry and at each other's throats so you can sell them the weapons.
And so there we go, off to a new arms race that's going to benefit the corporations. And the Pentagon appears to be saying that while we're not going to be able to compete with China economically in the future, that if we increasingly grow our military, that is now, our Pentagon budget is now larger than the entire world military spending combined. When you add up every country in the entire planet outside of the United States, add up what they spend on the military, we're now spending more than all of them combined.
Right. Now I thought we were going broke here, Bruce. I didn't know we could afford all of this.
Exactly.
An imaginary, illusionary arms race that they create just to sell the weapons so that we can go further and further in debt, not just this country, every country in the world. Meanwhile, the military-industrial complex, again, just sitting back and laughing.
We are going broke, and this is one of the major reasons why.
Yeah.
There's some really important research that recently came out of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst Economics Department. And if you go to our website, spaceforpeace.org, go down to the bottom of the home page on the left, we take you right to the information. They looked into military spending because, you know, people say it's good for the economy, it creates jobs. And so what they found was that, yes, it's true, when you spend $1 billion on military production, you do create X number of jobs. You create, in this case, 8,500 jobs on military production. What they found, when you spend that same $1 billion, for example, on health care, you create almost 13,000 jobs. Or if you spend it on education, you create more than 17,600 jobs. Or you spend it on creating public transportation systems, you create almost more than 19,000, almost 20,000 jobs per $1 billion. So the question to the American people who are job scared, job terrified, which would you rather have with your tax dollars? Per $1 billion, 8,500 jobs, building military production for endless war, or in the case of public transportation, almost 20,000 jobs per $1 billion, building rail systems to get us out of our gas-guzzling cars, to help solve for climate change, the real crisis that we have on the earth today.
Well, climate change is another one of those things you have to wonder about these people playing God, Bruce. I don't know if we've ever really talked about this. I'm with Bruce Gagnon today, and again, spaceforpeace.org is his website, doing a lot of really good work out there. We have questioned why geoengineering, weather modification, is never really brought up in the realm of climate change when we know they just admit openly that they're doing this constantly. Here in Texas, we have this aerosol spraying, which is just incredible. It does affect the weather. We notice the effects of the weather. It's also toxic and mind-numbing in the form of the heavy metals that come down that are consumed by the population. I mean, this is open-air pollution, really. And then we look at the Copenhagen summit and how much carbon, I guess, was used up by all of these elites traveling in their private jets and all the money that cost. The real issues never seem to get brought up on that, and that's not why you're on the show, Bruce, but I'd be interested in getting your opinion on all that.
Well, I am clear, I am absolutely clear that the Pentagon has been doing weather modification experimentation for years. In fact, they have talked about quite openly that they want to be able to use weather as a battlefield weapon. They want to be able to control the weather around the world and use it as a weapon in war.
Owning the weather by 2020 is the declassified document.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's really important, because when you start messing around with the weather, when you start lifting the ionosphere and trying to change, if you will, the very delicate balance of Mother Nature, you set in motion a whole series of events. You know, it's physics. You know, every time there's a reaction, there's a counter-reaction.
Exactly.
And so when you start messing around with things like that, it's no wonder that the weather around the world is screwed up. Everywhere I go, and I do a lot of traveling myself, speaking to groups, one of the first things people tell me usually when I come into a community is how really messed up their weather is. Their weather patterns are totally out of whack. And I know right here where I live in Maine, our winters the last couple of years are getting warmer and warmer and warmer. Just as of a few days ago, the ground here, and it's already February, the ground had not yet frozen this winter in the state of Maine. Can you imagine that?
Where we broadcast, we do have an affiliate in Maine, and they're listening in right now, Bruce, as we're talking. It's actually getting colder here in Texas. So there you go. I mean, it's definitely, I don't know if it's global warming, it's definitely climate change. Have you looked into, speaking of space weapons, space weaponry, playing God, mismanagement of technology, have you looked into HARP much?
Yeah, I have. I'm not an expert on it, but it's what they call a directed energy weapon, lifting the ionosphere in order to interfere with global communications and change weather. I'm quite convinced that it's real. I'm looking at a website now. It's the Federation of American Scientists, and they have on this a link to this study that was done by, it was an Air Force research paper.
Let's pick up with that when we come back, and then I want to talk about the escalation of drone attacks and more space weaponry, more space maneuvering around the world, changing the way we operate on the battlefield. Very dangerous stuff, folks. Somebody's got to oversee this, really. Jack Blood, Deadline Live. Bruce Gagnon with us. He'll come right back after this, and so will I. With all the satellites, the space junk, the space weapons, the militarization of space, there may be no escape from the prison planet. We're stuck here. We've got to make the best of this, folks. Bruce Gagnon with us, spaceforpeace.org. He is the coordinator for a great group of protesters who were beaten by Obama thugs at the Pentagon, including 80-year-old ladies here just a couple of days ago. Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. Again, Bruce, thank you so much for your time today. We were talking about HARP, and you had mentioned some documents before we went to break.
Yeah, well, it was one that you mentioned. Actually, it's a study, a research paper done by a bunch of Air Force officers in 1996, and it's on the website of the Federation of American Scientists. If you can find it just by Googling weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. And so, again, weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. And in there they spell out this is some of the things in the paper. What do we mean by weather modification, exploitation of near space for space control, opportunities afforded by space weather modification, communications dominance via ionospheric modification, and a lot of other things. So it's an interesting read, and I think it gives you an idea of the kind of things that the Pentagon has been working on for some time. And again, literally playing God with the planet So
Yeah,
the
Dennis
scientists,
Kucinich also had written the Space Preservation Act several years ago. I don't know how seriously that was taken, if it ever passed or became law. I don't think it did.
no, he couldn't even get hearings. He couldn't. In fact, he couldn't get one Democrat outside of himself to co-sponsor it. He couldn't get hearings from the Democratic Party. Democrats didn't want to go near it.
Well, good for him for doing that. I wish he'd bring it up again. And then our senator here in Texas, Kay Bailout Hutchison, also writing about things like aerosol spraying, chemtrails in some modified document that she had put forward to Congress and to the Senate. So this isn't like a conspiracy theory, is it, Bruce? They openly talk about this stuff.
No, it's real. It's real.
Let's move forward here. Part of the space. Well, first, let me ask you. During all the years you protested the Bush administration at the Pentagon, at Vandenberg Air Force Base, you ever see him beat up old ladies?
No, they would now and then they would come and pick off the lead organizer of that particular demonstration, arrest her, but they never ever literally tried to arrest everyone there. And again, these people were all standing on the other side of the line, not crossing the line onto the base. They weren't doing anything wrong. And but in this case, there were 8 out of 11 people that were arrested the other day, on January 31st. Several of them senior citizens, and so they've been increasing since Obama became president. Actually, they've been increasing their the way they increasingly harsh treatment of protesters at Vandenberg Air Force Base.
What do you say to people who maybe are more hawkish than you and I, Bruce, and believe that, the United States has to keep its arsenal at the highest level because it's a dangerous world out there, and if we let up for a second, we'll be overrun by Russians or Chinese or Muslims or whatever it's going to be? What do you say to those people that think that, this is just what we have to do? We have to bite the bullet, no pun intended, and just pay for all this stuff, let them do whatever they want to protect us.
Well, I say, we have one thing in common, me and that person that you refer to. We both want to see security, but we define it differently. I define security as health care, good education, clean drinking water, clean air, real security, if you will, for living on this planet Earth.
And you think those are things that the government should be doing?
I think those are things that we all should be doing, and my definition of government is not corporate-dominated government as we have today, but a people's government where the people collectively decide what we're going to do, how we're going to run our country, how we're going to run our society, what kinds of things we're going to have, how we're going to do education. That's my belief in government, is when the people decide that. I'm one of those old-fashioned people that actually believes in the notion of a real people's democracy, where the people come together, whether it's local, state, or federal, and make decisions about how we're going.
Sure.
I would say to that.
I mean, as long as you're not voting away my rights, being the majority. I
don't want to vote away anybody's rights, but at the same time, I do think that there are some things that just make sense, and I do think that ultimately we have a human right to health care. We have a human right to eat and to have clean air and clean drinking water. But let me finish your question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing I would say to that person on the other side of the fence, so to speak, is that sadly, empirical evidence is such that it shows that the United States has led the way in these arms races. It's now absolutely abundantly clear that Russia was never ahead of us, or the Soviet Union rather, they were never ahead of us in the nuclear arms race. They were always dragging along behind us, and that we led the way the whole time.
We were actually funding much of their arms race against us, kind of like we were funding both Iran and Iraq during their war.
Just as we're leading the way today and moving the arms race into space.
Yeah.
No one else is anywhere near where we are, but we are now creating a new arms race in space that is going to be extremely expensive. In fact, the Pentagon brags, and the weapons corporations brag, that it will be the largest industrial project in the history of the planet Earth. And they say that in order to pay for it, they need to shut down the entitlement programs, which officially are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and what's left of the welfare program after Bill Clinton got finished with it. So these are the programs that are being targeted by
And Bruce,
military-industrial
and let me
complex.
interrupt you here, Bruce, because this is an important point. They are wargaming against the people here who are going to be very upset when they begin cutting all these entitlement programs and are going to be marching with pitchfork and torch in hand. They are wargaming on how to round up and how to control the citizenry when this happens. And it's not when, it's not if, it's when, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you're right. And people, once people figure it out, and I think they're right on the edge. I think they're creeping up to the line of figuring it out. But, there comes a point when it's almost too late. You know what I mean? You see, we have to remember that the reason why we have the 40-hour work week, the reason why we don't, why we got rid of child labor laws, the reason why we have unemployment insurance and things like that were because of tremendous organizing gains that were made after the turn of the last century and into the Depression era, where people fought like hell just to have things like public education. And today, all of that is now in jeopardy. They're talking literally about returning us to what I call a 21st century form of feudalism, except this time we get a TV, colored TV, and a car. But
it can all go to hell partially, Bruce. You got to understand. I don't want to send my kid to a re-education center indoctrination school anyway. So.
No, but I'm not a huge fan, to be honest with you, of the state of public education today. But I do believe that we need some kind of education system in this country so it's not just the rich who have an educated group of children, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that it's not just the wealthy that can go to college. I mean, I like the idea of working class and poor people being able to have higher education. I'll never forget one time I went to Cuba, and they took us to a cigar factory, and they said, every day in the cigar factory, while people are sitting there making cigars all day long, someone sits up in the front of the room and they read them first the daily newspaper, and then they read novels. And they said at the time of the Cuban Revolution, it was the cigar workers that were in the forefront of creating the revolution against Batista, and it was because they were some of the most educated people in the country because they had someone reading to them all the time, you know what I mean? And so we know that there's a key link between social progress and social dignity, okay, and education, public education.
Yeah, I want to send my kid to the private school that the elite go to. I mean, we look at how much more dumbed down can our children be thanks to the education. We got off on that.
Jack, realistically, how many spaces on that dance floor are the rich going to allow the poor and the great unwashed and the working class?
Well, I don't care what they allow. We do it anyway.
Well, okay. Well, how many are they going to? You tell me the truth. Answer that question, though. How many are they really going to allow?
I don't look for permission from the elite, though,
okay.
Bruce. Maybe
all
that's
right.
the difference between me and other people.
You send your kid there, but I would submit to you that there are not going to be too many working-class poor kids at the schools of the rich people.
Well, again, and that has to do with charity in your community and these kinds of things. We've really gotten off the beaten path here, but I've enjoyed the debate, and I think we're very close on a lot of these things. I'm just so amazed by all the work that you guys do. It is so important. Can you talk about the escalation of drone attacks and what that means? Because I'm looking at these detached young men and women sitting in these computer cockpits like they're playing a video game, totally detached from humanity, maybe not fully feeling the impact of the people they're killing.
That's a good description, except for your last line. Apparently, what I've been reading lately is that these folks that are flying these drones, sitting, as you described, at the computer terminals with the joysticks at bases like Creech Air Force Base outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, hooked up to a satellite to the drone flying over Afghanistan and Pakistan, has a camera on board, the Predator, and it's outfitted with Hellfire missiles. And the guy sitting back at Las Vegas presses a button, and that in 1 second delay between him and the drone flying over Afghanistan, Pakistan, the missile fires, increasingly killing innocent civilians. Well over 800 innocent civilians killed in Pakistan since we began using these drones just a couple of years ago over there. But come to find out, these guys sitting at Creech Air Force Base in Nevada are having a higher rate of PTSD than even the ones on the ground in Pakistan and
Afghanistan. They should. And this is a horrible job. Who would want a job like this? I'm sure they're all indoctrinated, Bruce. And they think they're saving the planet and they're saving freedom, and this is all very constitutional. But it isn't going over very well. I mean, if you want to stop terrorism, maybe stop killing innocent women and children in the Middle East for any reason.
Exactly.
The drone attacks are up roughly about 40% right here over the last year since Obama has taken command.
That's right. You know, it's a lot cheaper. It's cheaper. They're cheaper than fighter planes. That you can keep them in the air for 24 hours at a time. They don't use as much fuel, and at the same time, it ushers in this new phase of modern warfare called robotics, and it's a way to make the wars quote unquote clean and antiseptic, hands off, clean war, where you can kill people, but fewer Americans lose their lives. And so the American people back home can just go shopping and never know we're even involved in a war because they never feel the pain. So that's the theory behind moving towards a robotic war. And the Pentagon is really pumping a lot of money into all this stuff, including nanotechnology, creating weapon systems, getting down to the size of a bumblebee and a fly, literally putting cameras on board, little drones, if you will, that size, flying them through the window.
I've done some pieces on the coming flesh-eating, organic, sustaining gray goo clouds of nanotechnology, which again, playing God, could threaten. I mean, they say if this gets out of control, it could threaten the entire planet. And yet they are looking. This is another just an amazing subject, Bruce, that I love talking about because their whole microprocessing world depends on them perfecting nanotechnology. Their whole new ways of fighting war depend on that. Yet this is probably one of the most dangerous things ever attempted in the existence of humanity.
And you know what? If we're doing it, then we're going to, we're leading the pack right now, but others are going to follow along, and we're going to end up suffering the consequences in the end. Well, let me ask you this question, Jack. What does it say about the soul of America that we have to continually create weapons of warfare in order to provide jobs for people in our country? That our economy is addicted to military spending. Out of every tax dollar that your listeners pay, 51 to 52 cents out of every tax dollar goes to the Pentagon.
Right.
What does it say about the soul of our nation that we have to kill people, that we have to be a killing culture in order to provide jobs for people in America?
No soul, baby. No heart, no soul. Completely detached, immoral. I might even add sociopathic. Now, stay with me for a few more minutes because I do want to get to what kind of solutions there might be to this, how we can help you. Think of that money, folks, spent on installing self-sufficient solar panels in every house in America that has sun. Oh, no, then we wouldn't be paying an electric bill. I see. Okay, we'll be right back. Deadline Live Chat at AmericanRadio.com. Bruce Gagnon has joined us on the broadcast today. His website is spaceforpeace.org. You can go over there. You can join their mailing list. They show you how to write your member of parliament or your congressman. They keep you up to speed on what's going on just right over your head. I know. Not many of you look up, but you have to realize what is going on and what is at stake here. Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. Bruce Gagnon is their director and coordinator. Bruce, I just got a message from one of our listeners at 911essentials.com. He said, Arsenal of Hypocrisy, your great, great film. They say it's one of their most watched and commented on videos, and they thank me for having you on, and I thank you for being here.
Oh, great, thanks. It was really, it's really remarkable, and it's held up well throughout these years, and it's gone all over the world. I'm grateful to those that have seen it and appreciate it. Thanks.
Your home base is in Maine, is that correct?
That's right.
And that's pretty close to Newfoundland. What about that Newfoundland missiles? What was your take on all that?
What's that? I don't think I know.
You don't know. Let me play this quick clip for you. It's about a minute long.
From Ottawa. Hi there, Tom. Now, even in the last few minutes, we have a new development in this mystery. Can you bring us up to date on what the French embassy is now saying about a possible missile?
Well, they're saying that there was no military activity, missile or otherwise, at the time that the people of Harbor Mill, Newfoundland, would have seen something in the sky above them. So they're saying if there was a missile up there or a rocket, it wasn't theirs. So that's the new development from the French, which leaves the question open, what was it And who did it belong to?
That's the skinny. A couple of missiles whizzing over the Newfoundland coast. A lot of people reporting it and seeing it. Nobody, no military, no government, nobody knows anything about it. Bruce, you didn't hear about it either, huh?
No, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah.
When was this supposedly happening?
Just about a week ago, I think.
Oh, I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, I have a clip on that and more information at deadlinelive.info for my listeners. All right, Bruce, what do we do about all of this? We go to protest. 80-year-old women are getting beat up by Obama thugs at the Pentagon. You got people and organizations all around the world protesting, educating people on the issues. Still, it rolls forward like it is an uncontrollable beast. What do we do?
Well, Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist, said that power concedes nothing without a demand. And so the question is, what is our demand today? And I think you answered it right before the last break when you started talking about, wouldn't it be great to have a solar device on our house so we're not paying a monthly electric bill? You want to talk about freedom. Now, that's freedom, isn't it, when we're not hooked up intravenously to the electric company, right?
Yeah, and somehow the global warming people miss these things. It seems to me they also miss using hemp for fuel and for paper, and they miss the depleted uranium issue, and as I mentioned, the weather modification issue.
Yeah.
Go ahead, though. I mean, because these are the things that we need to do. We have poor, starving people in this country. I know we got to take care of the Haitians and all of that, but we've got a lot of problems, and yet we're just hemorrhaging money into this arsenal of hypocrisy.
So why then don't we make the demand that we convert the military-industrial complex? We have that information that I gave earlier about the UMass Amherst Economics Department. It's on our website at spaceforpeace.org, saying that we get literally twice as many jobs when we spend our money on developing solar, developing wind, developing rail systems to change our footprint on this earth, help solve for climate change. We reduce our dependence on the big oil corporations and the electric corporations and everything else, and then we create good jobs for people that they can feel good about, that they're proud of, that are helping to provide a future for the coming generation.
We all want those things. I mean,
exactly.
How about this?
So why don't we demand them? To me, it's a win-win. You look at it; it's like a conjunction of forces at work here. It helps unions because it helps labor create more jobs. It helps environmental groups. It helps peace groups because we don't have to fight wars for oil. And don't tell me we can't do it. If we're building nanotechnology to have literally weapon systems as small as your fingernail flying around, spying on people and killing people, then we can reduce the size and the cost per unit of things like solar technology.
Right.
We could do that, right?
Well, where there's a will, there's a way. There just isn't a will.
Exactly.
Bruce, here's the thing. I think if we're going to ever have peace in this world, we have got to take on the Federal Reserve, the central banks, the international banking structure, who are making profit by loaning governments money to fund these wars and to buy these weapons. We will never get peace, a moment's peace. We'll never live in peace unless we eradicate these money changers from the temples all over the world. And we also, I would say, need a citizens panel on technology in general and its military applications, that we decide, a multilateral, unilateral citizens panel. We decide what gets used and what doesn't. We decide if they're going to play God or not.
I agree with you on all of that. I think you're absolutely right. Let's connect the dots, but let's collectively make demands. Let's stop being tools of the elite, sitting in front of our televisions, totally consuming what they feed us, the brainwashing that they feed us. I have an image where the top of our head lifts up and they pour, they brainwash us. They literally colonize
right into our brains.
Colonize our minds, and they enter our bodies. Our bodies are not free. You want to talk about freedom? We're never going to be free unless we decolonize our minds, decorporatize our minds, take our minds back.
Yeah, you better. Well said. Bravo. Thank you very much, because that's our fight, Bruce. Our fight to search, to obtain a higher consciousness, to have our own minds. This is what they say, right? When they're talking about the Iraqi people or the Afghani people and even us. They want to win our hearts and minds. For there to be a winner, there has to be a loser, Bruce.
Yeah, you're right. That's I never thought of that, but that's damn damn well right.
I get lucky sometimes. Spaceforpeace.org. Please go over there, folks. Support them. Get on their email list. Get active or get radioactive, as another great activist said. Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. Bruce, what a pleasure it is having you. We may not agree on everything, but I know without peace and without justice, we're never going to have the right debate, and that is the main thing. We did that today. Thank you so much, Bruce, for participating.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, folks, we'll come right back. Second hour coming up in